Yes, people, welcome back to another episode of United State of Mind. And this time we're going to be talking about, is Ten Hag on borrowed time? Now, obviously, it's not been the greatest week of results for Manchester United. And we have to really look into real detail of why we are even here at this point in the season, and potentially what could happen in the future as well. But before we get into the video, make sure you're hitting the like button, subscribe button as well if you're new, hit the notification bell and all that good stuff right there. Let's get into the video. So, Ten Hag, is he on borrowed time? I mean, some disappointing results, as I mentioned. Most recently, Spurs at home losing 3-0 is unacceptable. And that one, I totally agree. Now, let me start off by saying this. I do not care who the manager is of Manchester United, right? With Ineos coming in and now taking control of the sporting direction, really and truly, there's a process that's going to take some time. And obviously, Omar Barada has come out recently and spoken about Project 2028, which is the timeline or the target for Manchester United to become Premier League champions again. That's the first time that anybody post Fergie has spoken in that level of detail or that level of conviction to say, this is our target and this is what we all have to. And when I say all, I'm not talking about players, not talking about just managers. I'm talking about every single person, everybody on the non-playing side too. Everybody's got a target to hit. We want to be Premier League champions by this time. And in order to do that, every single person in this club is responsible. So you look at that and you say, okay, that's the target, that's the aim, right? And with that, it does not matter what happens within that, as long as you get to that final destination. So the manager will change, players will change, staff behind the scenes will change. You want some continuity through that process because that will make it a lot easier for you to get to that final destination. But it doesn't really matter who the manager is. It doesn't really matter who the players are, right? As long as they are all focused on the same goal. And so Ten Hag being in here right now and some of the players being in position right now, they are supposed to contribute to that overall process. They are supposed to be putting the building blocks down for the next people to come in and take the reins and continue that process on, right? Obviously, right now it's not working out like that, but let's start here, right? So, obviously, Ten Hag starts the season off. Ineos have decided after review that, where apparently some other managers were contacted. They've talked about Tuchel and Mourinho and Conte, Thomas Frank, and other managers like that, right? And he was confirmed. Ten Hag was confirmed as the manager that was going to take the club forward until the end of his deal, right? With the contract extension on top of it. So 2 years. Okay. Obviously, results are key here. The results are even king here, right? Because when you look at the underlying numbers, they're not good for this season alone, right? Let's just talk about this season. 1 goal at Old Trafford in the league all season. That was against Fulham on the opening day. Back-to-back 3-0 defeats, I believe, right, in the league at home. So obviously Liverpool and now Spurs. And apparently, and I don't know if this is true, if this is like somebody's kind of taken the stat and ran with it, but United have conceded 3+ goals 25 times in Ten Hag's tenure. If someone can actually verify that for me, please let me know in the comments, because I'm not so sure if that's true. Because if that's true, that's crazy to me. But when you look at that as a whole, it doesn't look good. Now let's talk about Ruud van Nistelrooy. So a lot of people have earmarked Ruud van Nistelrooy as Ten Hag's replacement due to his appointment as an assistant, a first team coach or first team assistant in the summer. Now, I think a lot of fans obviously jumped ahead when they saw that, and their expectation was that Erik ten Hag wouldn't last until Christmas and that Ruud will just step in as the natural replacement. But then I started thinking about this and I'm like, that doesn't really make sense, because if you were looking to get rid of Erik ten Hag anyway, you would have just sacked him in the summer and then appointed Ruud anyway. But I think this is a bit of a chess move by Ineos, right? After doing their review at the end of the season, speaking to different managers and maybe not necessarily deciding on the right type of fit for what they want to do to move forward, they decided to go and secure Ruud's services. Now, the reason why is because I felt like they looked at the coaching market currently and said, maybe we don't have the right fit, but what if we was to go and get a younger, up-and-coming type of talent in terms of management and bring him in to the setup so that we can probably look ahead with our succession plan. And this is an interesting thing, right? United haven't had a succession plan post Fergie, like even before Fergie, right? When Fergie was in place, they weren't looking at when Fergie eventually retires or leaves us for whatever reason. We need to have a plan in place. We've been very reactive in that sense, right? So let's go back. Fergie's in place. He announces randomly that I've had enough. I want to spend more time with my wife and my family. I feel like I've had enough. I feel like he had a bit of foresight and said, this city train that they're rolling on and what's happening with our club, they're gonna bypass us very soon, and I don't want to have any parts of that. I feel like he had a little bit of that in his mind because he knew that he's taken this team, this club, as far as he can take it. There needs to be a lot more that happens behind the scenes and around him for them to continually be successful. But that's another thing for another time. So Moyes comes in, very reactive. I don't think that the right level of scrutiny process to be able to pinpoint the right person to come in at the right time to take on this huge job happened. David Moyes, respectable career in the Premier League, but not the level of, I don't know, expertise or, you know, status to be able to take on a job like this. And he crumbles, right, within that. 7 months into the job, sacked. They make a quick decision. Interim manager, Ryan Giggs comes in. And then you know what was happening. Give it Giggs, and all of that type of stuff. You know that stuff was happening, right? And he does the final 4 games of the season, and people are expecting him to step up and become the Manchester United manager because he's been there so long. He's been a part of the fabric of the club, right? I'm so glad that didn't happen. I'm so glad, because look at where Ryan Giggs is right now. The stuff that was happening with the wife and his brother and all. Look at him. He's now lost. He's in the abyss right now. Like, we don't even know where he is right now, and I'm glad, right? We stayed clear of that. Okay, so Louis van Gaal comes in. Once again, I don't think there's been a process surrounding that succession plan after David Moyes. It looks as if we've handpicked a manager who hadn't been in club football in about 12 years. His last club football job was FC Twente, where he won the title with them. I believe it was 2011 or 2012, one of those years, right? That was his last international job. Sorry, no, it's not. I think it was 2008, because I think in 2011-12, Steve McLaren was there. I think 2008. So he hadn't been in a job in club football for about 8 years, I think it was, Louis van Gaal. And obviously, he's come back into the forefront of things because of what he's done with the Dutch national team, with taking them to 3rd place in the World Cup in that year, right? In the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. And so United decided, hey, he's a manager who's making some noise right now. He's free agent as well, because obviously he's not tied to Holland beyond that. So let's go and pluck him. No succession plan, just reactive. You bring him in, you give him 1-2 years, and then you make your decision because he doesn't make top 4. And that's the target, that's the aim for the Glazers and for Ed Woodward and Richard Arnold, because that Champions League money is what basically funds a lot of things that's going on. If we're not in the Champions League, we lose money. He doesn't make top 4. We come 5th in that final season that he's there. We win the FA Cup. And I was there at Wembley that day. And I say this story a lot. I was there at Wembley against United against Crystal Palace in the FA Cup final in 2016, I believe it was, right? And the game is over, the celebrations are dying down, and everybody's leaving the stadium, and everybody's on their phones thinking about what's happening next, because you're hearing rumors that Jose Mourinho has already agreed to become the Manchester United manager. Such a classless way for it to happen. We even allowed the dust to settle. Louis van Gaal is sitting in a press conference, and there's journalists talking to him about Jose Mourinho about to take his job and replace him, and he has no clue, right? He's taking pictures with Sir Bobby Charlton, rest in peace, and Sir Alex, right, with the FA Cup trophy, celebrating his victory, what he'd been able to achieve in a pretty disastrous season for us at that particular point in time, right? No succession planning. They reacted, right? City were about to get Pep in for that summer, and United said, well, if they're gonna have Pep, we need to get someone that's got a big enough character and name and whatnot to be able to go toe to toe with him, and they go for Jose Mourinho. No succession plan, reactive once again. Okay, and then we land ourselves in a situation with Mourinho. That doesn't work. And then you bring in Oli, interim, and then you're reactive once again. Some good results, but only over a period of time. You're reactive, you make him permanent manager, and look what happens. He crashes and burns. Once again, reactive. You go and get Ranić, thinking he's going to come and save things. That doesn't work. Reactive. And now you're at Erik Ten Hag, and you're looking like you're going to be reactive once again. Well, maybe not, right? So, in an ideal world, right, this is what I think the chess move that Ineos has made. They brought in an up and coming manager in Ruud van Nistelrooy, right? And let's talk about Ruud quickly. His education as a coach manager has been interesting. So obviously gets his coaching badges, and then he goes and works with the Dutch setup, right? So I believe he had some dealings with the like youth levels, and then stepped into the senior teams kind of coaching setup. Does his bit of education there, then he moves over to his club PSV, and the club that he's come from originally before he came to United as a player, and then he's their head coach, and then wins and is successful there at least, right? And then at that point, it's like he can continue there or he can continue his education somewhere else, but he decides that he wants to come back to Manchester United, right? And then I'm sure there's been some discussions about him potentially becoming the head coach overall at some point in time. Basically, he's an up-and-coming coach, and Ineos have decided to secure the services of an up-and-coming coach now, rather than having to do a whole extensive search when you already have somebody in your setup who's integrated already, knows the players and knows the targets, right? So in an ideal world, this is what's supposed to happen. Ten Hag is continuing to build on what he's been working on, right, with the players and move the process forward. And then the future head coach, i.e. Ruud, right, is already integrated into the setup, right, rather than being thrown into the deep end of a sinking ship, right, which is what I think a lot of fans are looking at right now. They're saying Erik Ten Hag, poor results, he's not a good manager, let's get rid of him before Christmas, bring in Ruud to come and save this. And that's reactive, right? I'm not saying that, like that shouldn't happen, that Erik Ten Hag shouldn't be sacked or whatever. Like, if the results don't improve, of course he's gonna have to get sacked, right? But the time that Ruud is in the setup and integrated allows him to work with the players that he has at his disposal, build rapport with them, and eventually graduate into the head coach role in future, right? So he can be in a position to lead the team effectively, right? Let's say Erik Ten Hag gets sacked, right? This scenario could happen where Ten Hag gets sacked and Ineos decides to bring in an interim to continue to allow Ruud to have time where the ship is steady, and then that interim manager goes, and then just bring forward a succession plan a little bit earlier where Ruud can step in as the head coach, but at least he has a clean slate. He's not coming in to try and prove that he's good enough to take this group, like similar to what Oli did. Like, that's not what we want. And speaking of Oli, right, maybe the interim manager, if they decide, Ineos decide to sack Erik Ten Hag, maybe Oli should be the interim manager again, right? But only an interim, where you say to him, work your magic, do what you did when you came here a few years back in the interim role, and once your interim role is done, we'll say our goodbyes, and then we'll have Ruud van Nistelrooy come in and be the head coach at the start of the next season, right? But I want to end the video on this, right? Like, you look at the way people have reacted in the fan base, it's mainly online. It's hard to gauge when you're talking about fans across the board, because there's some that are online and they're also on the terraces, and there's some that are just purely on the terraces and not online and whatnot, okay? But in my opinion, I don't think that the United fan base as a whole are ready for a rebuild. A rebuild just doesn't necessarily mean, you get rid of some players and you bring in some players and like somehow it's successful, right? Like, no, it's a lot bigger than that, right? And let's talk about what I spoke about earlier on in the video in regards to Omar Barada, right? He's set a target. So imagine you've got a dartboard and the bullseye is your target, right? He set that target. Everybody in the club, as I said, playing and non-playing staff, knows what the target is. Premier League champions by 2028, Project 2028. Like, rebuilding to that point is going to take a lot of destroying first, right? And some of it's happened already, and some of it is going to continue to happen, right? I just don't think that the fan base have a stomach for it. I think that football fans nowadays want instant gratification. So they want aesthetically pleasing football, and they think that's going to equal major trophies, and that's not how it works, right? Look at City, for example, as an example. Like, and I don't like to use examples like when I'm comparing to Manchester United, but I think it's important to note these things, right? City's ownership group came in 2008. Their ultimate goal was to win the Champions League. It took them 15 years. They didn't win the Champions League all that time until 2023. Of course, during that time, they was able to win domestically, and that's part of the process, right? Like, if you want to win the Champions League, you're not going to be able to go from 6th in the Premier League to be able to win the Champions League. That's a fluke, right? But what they've done is they've been able to build a winning culture, right? Where they don't turn their nose up at any trophy, like how United fans turn their nose up at a League Cup or an FA Cup. Those trophies are important. They're domestic trophies that allow you to establish some sort of dominance somewhere. This is why Pep, Mourinho, when they came to this country, the first thing they wanted to do was win that first trophy, which was the League Cup, because the earliest one you can win and it can establish something. It can spark something. This is the reason why United fans were getting onto Oli for not winning a trophy whilst he was Man United manager. We win trophies as a club. That's what we do. As a football league, that's what you want. You want the medals. As a manager, you want the medal, right? So of course, results along that process are very important. It's hard, but it's very, very important, right? If United want to be great again, it's going to take a lot of different things. And I don't really want to discuss that in real detail here because I don't want to long out the video, right? But I've discussed it in previous videos. There's, what we will need through that process is continuity. So to a certain degree, manager, to a certain degree, coaching staff, to a certain degree, people behind the scenes, a certain degree, players as well, right? It's not just about clearing dead wood like we've done this summer, right? It's about changing the whole identity of the club, right? And having a clear vision, which I believe we have now in this project 2028, that everybody in the club is clear on. And then from that point, everybody's actions from that point, once you've established what the objective is, everybody's actions will actually contribute to the overall success. And that's my opinion, all right? But look, we've come to the end of the video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, man. Like, is Ten Hag on borrowed time? Does everything that I've discussed make sense? Is Ruud van Nistelrooy going to be the man to eventually step up and graduate into that head coach role? Would you like to see him do it now? Would you like to see him potentially do it in the summer if Ten Hag gets sacked? Would you be open to seeing Oli come back in an interim position, but only an interim position if Ten Hag gets sacked? Or will Ten Hag be allowed to just run through this process? I've seen him bounce back once before, especially especially in that first season where it was a horrible start to the season. He bounced back. Maybe he can do it again by making some tweaks. Can the players step up a little bit as well? I don't know, but let me know in the comments, people. But I'm out, people. Make sure you're hitting the like button, subscribe button as well if you're new. Hit the notification button. We out. Peace.